Wind, dust rolling across an empty street. A church bell rings once, then silence. In the American West, names were not introductions. They were warnings. Some men wore badges but delivered vengeance. Some outlaws robbed banks but won the public's admiration. Some leaders fought empires with nothing but courage and disappearing land. 25 lives, 25 storms, and every one of them helped build or break the frontier. This is not the Hollywood West. This is the raw one. And we begin with the man who walked the razor's edge between law and legend. Wyatt Earp. The man who refused to die before Tombstone, before the OK Corral, before history made him untouchable. Wyatt Earp was a drifter. Born in 1848 in Illinois, he grew up during America's westward expansion. His father constantly moved the family west: Iowa, California, Missouri. Instability shaped him early. At 20, he married. Months later, his wife died of typhoid. Grief hardened him before the West ever could. He drifted into gambling halls and brothels. At one point, he was accused of horse theft in Arkansas and fled town to avoid prosecution. Reinvention became survival. By the 1870s, Earp was wearing a badge in Wichita, then Dodge City. He learned quickly that enforcing law in the West meant negotiation first, gunfire second. But Tombstone changed everything. In 1881, tension between the Earp brothers and the cowboy faction exploded. The gunfight at the OK Corral lasted 30 seconds, 3 men dead. Wyatt walked away without a scratch. But peace didn't follow. When his brother Morgan was assassinated, Wyatt abandoned formal law and launched the Vendetta Ride, hunting the suspects down one by one across Arizona. Justice or execution. By the end, even lawmen were unsure. Earp would later move to California, invest in mining, advise early Hollywood Western films, even consulting actors on how gunfights really happened. He died in 1929, but the version of him that stood in Tombstone, he never did. Next, Bass Reeves, the marshal who feared nothing. Born into slavery in 1838, Reeves escaped during the Civil War into Indian Territory. He survived among native tribes, learning their languages and terrain. That knowledge would make him unstoppable. He was appointed Deputy U.S. Marshal in 1875. He rode alone into territory. Most men refused to enter in groups. Over 3,000 arrests. 14 men killed in self-defense. He used disguises brilliantly, once posing as a farmer seeking shelter from outlaws. When they fell asleep, he cuffed them all, but the moment that defines him. He arrested his own son for murder. No favoritism, no compromise. Integrity in the West was rare. Reeves made it feared. Next, Seth Bullock, Order Without Gunfire. Deadwood in 1876 was chaos incarnate. Gold had been discovered in the Black Hills, and thousands flooded in illegally. No structure, no law. Bullock arrived and became sheriff. Men claimed he could stop a riot simply by walking into it. Unlike many lawmen, Bullock rarely engaged in duels. He relied on psychological dominance. When criminals saw him coming, they reconsidered their plans. He would later become a close friend of President Theodore Roosevelt, another man shaped by frontier toughness, but one lawman would forever be tied to the outlaw he killed. Next is Pat Garrett. Pat Garrett, the man who shot a legend. And his name will always echo with Billy the Kid. Garrett was once a buffalo hunter, then a saloon keeper. He knew Billy personally, but in 1881 he became Lincoln County Sheriff, and Billy was his target. Billy escaped jail after killing 2 deputies. The entire territory believed he was untouchable. Garrett tracked him to Fort Sumner. 1 dark room, 1 shadow, 1 shot. Billy was 21. Garrett spent the rest of his life explaining that moment. He died years later in a suspicious shooting, possibly over a land dispute. In the West, endings were rarely clean. Yet, not every gunfighter stayed behind a badge forever. Next, Bat Masterson, the reinvention artist. Bat Masterson, buffalo hunter at 17, sheriff in Dodge City by 25, gambler, gunfighter, and then newspaper columnist in New York. Masterson moved east and wrote about boxing and sports for decades, from revolvers to reporting, without losing his mystique. He proved something essential about the West. Identity was fluid, but while some lawmen evolved, others stayed relentless. Next, Bill Tilghman, the Guardsman of Oklahoma. Bill Tilghman, one of the 3 guardsmen who cleaned up Indian territory. He pursued the Doolin-Dalton gang tirelessly. He believed in due process, unusual for the era. In 1924, long after most frontier legends were gone, Tilghman was shot by a corrupt prohibition agent while trying to arrest him. The Old West didn't end in 1890. It died slowly. And on the other side of these badges lived men who rejected law entirely. Jesse James, the Confederate Phantom. Jesse James, a former Confederate guerrilla fighter. After the Civil War, he continued attacking Union-aligned banks and railroads. He framed his robberies as political resistance. Newspapers amplified him. He became America's first celebrity criminal. But on April 3, 1882, Robert Ford shot him in the back of the head. The West loved boldness. It despised betrayal. If Jesse was rage, Butch Cassidy was calculation. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Butch Cassidy. The Sundance Kid Cassidy preferred planning. Sundance preferred shooting. Together, they led the Wild Bunch, targeting banks and trains with precision. The Pinkerton Detective Agency hunted them relentlessly. They fled to Argentina, then Bolivia. In 1908, surrounded by Bolivian soldiers, gunfire erupted inside a house. 2 bodies were found, but some believe Cassidy survived. In the West, mystery was immortality. But not all outlaws had charm. Some were pure violence. John Wesley Hardin, the Storm. John Wesley Hardin claimed 42 kills. Shot a man for snoring. He was brilliant, studied law in prison, released, became an attorney, then shot dead in a saloon. The West allowed reinvention, but it remembered grudges. And then there was the woman who ruled the outlaw underworld. Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. Belle Starr associated with the James Younger Gang, married outlaws, wore black velvet riding habits with pistols at her hips, convicted of horse theft, shot in the back in 1889. Her murder remains unsolved. Even queens fall alone on frontier roads. But beyond outlaws and lawmen, there were icons. Now the West shifts. The gunsmoke clears, and legend begins to harden into myth. These were not simply lawmen or outlaws. They became symbols, and symbols live longer than bullets. Wild Bill Hickok, the man who sat facing the door. Wild Bill Hickok, before there was Wyatt Earp, there was Wild Bill. Born James Butler. Hickok in 1837, Illinois. Tall, long hair, piercing eyes. He didn't just carry pistols, he wore them reversed, butt forward, in a cross-draw style that became iconic. He practiced drawing until it was muscle memory, faster than thought. His legend truly ignited in 1865 during a duel in Springfield, Missouri. Hickok shot Davis Tutt in a public square from over 70 yards away, an extraordinary distance for the era. It wasn't just a gunfight, it was theater. Newspapers exaggerated his exploits. Stories claimed he killed hundreds. Truth, likely far fewer. But perception became power. He later served as sheriff in Hays and Abilene, Kansas. His temper, however, was unpredictable. In one tragic incident, he accidentally shot his own deputy through a wall during a barroom fight. Even legends misfire. By 1876, his eyesight was failing. He drifted to Deadwood, Dakota Territory, chasing gold, chasing fortune. On August 2nd, 1876, he sat down for a poker game at Nuttall and Mann's saloon. He usually sat facing the door. That day, the seat was taken. Jack McCall walked in behind him. One shot to the back of the head. In Hickok's hand, aces and eights, the dead man's hand. But if Wild Bill was the gunslinger poets wrote about, the next legend rewrote what a woman could be in the West. Calamity Jane, the wildfire, Calamity Jane, born Martha, Jane Cannery. She reinvented herself long before social media ever existed, claimed she was a scout for General Custer, claimed she saved lives during Indian attacks, claimed she rode with Wild Bill. Some claims were true, many were not. But in the West, truth mattered less than survival. She dressed in men's buckskins, swore, drank heavily, rode fearlessly. She worked as a laundress, a nurse, possibly a prostitute, doing whatever kept her afloat. When smallpox struck Deadwood in 1878, she reportedly nursed the sick. There was compassion beneath the bravado. By the end of her life, she performed in Buffalo Bill's show, telling embellished stories to eager audiences. She died in 1903, poor and worn, buried beside Wild Bill Hickok. Whether lovers or simply legends intertwined, history leaves it blurred. And no one blurred reality and performance more masterfully than the next man. Buffalo Bill Cody, the man who sold the West to the world. Buffalo Bill, William Frederick Cody, was not content with living history. He packaged it. As a teenager, he rode for the Pony Express. Later, he hunted buffalo to feed railroad workers, earning the nickname Buffalo Bill. He scouted for the U.S. Army during the Plains Wars. He fought in battles, then reenacted them for applause. In 1883, he launched Buffalo Bill's Wild West. It wasn't called a show, it was called a spectacle. Real Lakota performers, real cowboys, sharpshooters. Stagecoach robberies reenacted live. He toured Europe, performed for Queen Victoria. The West, raw and violent, became exportable entertainment. The myth began replacing the memory. And standing at the center of that spectacle was a woman who redefined precision. Annie Oakley, Little Sure Shot. Annie Oakley, born Phoebe Ann Mosey in Ohio. Poverty forced her to hunt for food at age 8. By 15, she was supporting her family with her marksmanship. She joined Buffalo Bill's show in 1885. Small in stature, deadly in accuracy. She could shoot the edge off a playing card at 30 paces. She once shot a cigarette from the mouth of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Years later, when World War I erupted, she reportedly joked, "I'm sorry I shot the wrong man." Humor aside, her skill was undeniable. She challenged the idea that the West belonged to men alone. But while performers captivated audiences, another frontiersman helped expand America itself. Kit Carson, the Pathfinder. Carson left home at 16 and headed west. He trapped beaver, lived among native tribes, married into Arapaho and Cheyenne families. He later guided explorer John C. Fremont across the Rockies in California. His knowledge of terrain made expansion possible. Dime novels exaggerated his bravery into near superhuman feats. He became fictional before he became historical. But Carson's legacy is complicated. During the Navajo campaigns, he led scorched earth tactics under U.S. orders, destroying crops and forcing surrender. Hero to some, agent of destruction to others. The West was not black and white, it was collision. And nowhere was that collision more powerful than among the leaders who fought to defend their world. Next. Sitting Bull, the visionary born into the Hunkpapa Lakota, warrior by 14, holy man by calling. In 1876, as U.S. forces advanced into the Black Hills seeking gold, Sitting Bull performed the Sundance. During the ritual, he reportedly had a vision. Soldiers falling into camp like grasshoppers. Days later, at the Battle of Little Bighorn, Lakota and Cheyenne warriors defeated Lieutenant Colonel Custer. It was the greatest native victory of the Plains Wars. But victory was temporary. Relentless U.S. expansion forced him north into Canada. Eventually, he surrendered. Years later, he joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, earning money, observing white society. In 1890, during tensions over the Ghost Dance movement, Indian police attempted to arrest him. Gunfire erupted. He was killed. Resistance often ends not in glory, but in tragedy. Fighting beside him at Little Bighorn was a warrior who refused photographs, refused surrender, and remains one of the most enigmatic figures in American history. Next. Crazy Horse, the silent storm reserved, intense, strategic. He rejected fame, rejected spectacle. He led the charge that overwhelmed Custer's forces. He never signed a treaty, never posed for a photograph. To this day, no verified image exists. After surrendering in 1877 under starvation pressure, he resisted confinement. During a scuffle with guards, he was stabbed with a bayonet. He died that night. His burial site remains unknown. Mystery protects him. But no warrior evaded capture longer than the next name whispered in fear across deserts. Geronimo, the endurance of the Apache. A Bedonkohe Apache, his real name, Goyakla, one who yawns. But Mexican soldiers called him Geronimo during battle. For years, he led small bands resisting both Mexican and U.S. forces. He knew the Sierra Madre Mountains like veins in his hand. Thousands of troops hunted him. He vanished repeatedly. In 1886, exhausted and outnumbered, he surrendered. He spent the rest of his life as a prisoner of war, ironically becoming a celebrity attraction at fairs. He rode in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade. Yet, he was never allowed to return home. But perhaps the most heartbreaking words spoken in the West came from a man who simply wanted peace. Chief Joseph, I will fight no more forever. Chief Joseph, leader of the Nez Perce. In 1877, ordered onto a smaller reservation, Joseph led 800 people, including women and children, on a 1,170-mile retreat toward Canada. They fought multiple battles while protecting their families. They were only 40 miles from safety when U.S. forces surrounded them. Cold, exhausted, starving, Joseph surrendered. His words echoed, "I will fight no more forever." Yet they were not allowed to return home. And among the Apache, one leader proved that diplomacy could be as powerful as war. Cochise, the strategist. Cochise, brilliant tactician. After false accusations led to violence, Cochise fought U.S. forces for over a decade. He mastered guerrilla warfare in Arizona's Dragoon Mountains. Eventually, he negotiated peace through intermediary Tom Jeffords. He chose survival of his people over endless war. He died in 1874, and with leaders like him gone, the frontier changed. Doc Holliday, loyalty and consumption dentist by training. Diagnosed with tuberculosis at 21. He moved west seeking dry air. Instead, he found gambling and gunfights. He stood beside Wyatt Earp at the OK Corral. He coughed blood between confrontations. He was volatile, intelligent, fiercely loyal. He died in a Colorado hotel bed, surprised he didn't die with boots on. The law, however, could still be theatrical. Judge Roy Bean. Law, west of the Pecos. Judge Roy Bean, self-appointed justice of Langtree, Texas. Held court inside his saloon. Often fined defendants, payable directly to him. He once fined a corpse $40 for carrying a concealed weapon. Absurdity thrived where structure failed. Yet he maintained relative order in an otherwise chaotic region. And finally, the man whose execution symbolized the closing chapter. Tom Horn, the last rope. Tom Horn scout, Army interpreter, Pinkerton detective. Later accused of working as a hired gun for cattle barons during range wars. In 1901, he was convicted of murdering a 14-year-old boy. Evidence was circumstantial. He was hanged in 1903. Many believe he was scapegoated. When the trapdoor opened, the Old West era symbolically closed. The West was never simple. It was grief and gold, honor and betrayal, expansion and resistance, lawmen who crossed lines, outlaws who became myths, warriors who defended worlds that vanished, 25 lives, not heroes, not villains, human beings shaped by a brutal frontier. The railroads came, the barbed wire tightened, the dust settled. But if you listen closely, in the wind across open plains, you can still hear them riding, symbolically closed.